Well, Natural Resources Canada estimates that there's a 1 in 5 chance of a very strong earthquake in the next 50 years. And here in Vancouver, we happen to be located in Canada's most earthquake-prone region. And earlier this month, the City of Vancouver released a report on the seismic risk in existing privately owned buildings. Now, the report presents the findings from a recently completed seismic risk assessment. It's going to go to council today. And Perry Adebar is a professor of structural and earthquake engineering at the University of BC. And Perry's been good enough to join us this morning. Good morning to you, Perry.
Good morning.
So tell me about what you see as the most crucial findings of this report into privately owned buildings.
I think the report summarizes what we've known for a long time. I think what's really important is that it is going to the city council, and the council will receive that report and then will authorize staff to move on to the next steps.
And so just how earthquake ready is Vancouver overall when you look at this report?
Well, I mean, so Vancouver, the city, has done a lot of great things in the last decade and a half to improve preparedness. But the part where we really haven't done much is on privately owned buildings, right? People we've not gone around to tell people, how worried they need to be about their particular building. And this is the start of doing that.
And so what kind of mitigation efforts have we seen then when it comes to all buildings in Metro Vancouver? I mean, we hear a lot of concern from parents about, some of the older schools not being seismically upgraded, for instance.
Well, the province has done a lot of work and the city around schools. So schools have been identified as a priority, and a lot of great work's been done there. Sure, there's more work to be done. Bridges. A lot of work has been done in the province on bridges and so on. There's been a lot of work done on infrastructure. And the one thing that hasn't been done is to look at all those privately owned buildings. Mm-hmm. So we have lots of high-rise buildings in the West End that were built before we knew how to design for earthquakes. So some of those buildings have a very high risk during a significant earthquake. And this is the start of identifying those buildings and then doing something about it.
And what are the specific risks then? I mean, give me a kind of building that we built in the 1960s and what the risk might be.
Well, we've actually studied in detail the drawings of about 350 of those buildings, the older ones. Mm-hmm. And what you see is some of the buildings are terrific. Some of the old buildings, I'd be happy to be in one of them during a serious earthquake. But some of them are extremely scary. So there are some bad apples in the bunch. And that's the issue. The issue is identifying those bad buildings and doing something about it before the earthquake happens.
And structurally, what is the difference between a bad building and a good building?
It's hard to summarize it in simple terms. The simplest thing would be to say the amount of structural walls in the building. So some buildings have lots of walls that go from the top of the building right down to the foundation. Some of them have very few. And it's the ones that have very few walls that are a particular concern. But I just want to caution you, this is not something a lay person can go and look at their building and say, my building is safe or not. You need a pretty knowledgeable engineer to have a look.
So if you and others have gone around the West End looking at 350 buildings, is it possible for residents of any of those buildings to know how their building might fare in the event of a major earthquake?
Well, that's what I see this being so important. This is the first step towards doing that, right? So we looked at these drawings in confidence, right? We were not able to tell anybody about what we saw, and what we saw was very frightening. And this is the right way to proceed to making something happen. This is the first step. There's more steps to come. And hopefully in the next few years, we'll see significant action on this.
But if you came across a building that you thought was so dangerous that it was in danger of collapse during a major earthquake, is it not incumbent on you to make that information public and let the people who know in that building, let them know what their fate could be?
Yeah, it's not that simple, unfortunately. I mean, and it's not, it's very difficult to say this is the one bad bad building, right? There's going to be a number of them that need some action, right? And
Right.
it's not appropriate for me to alarm the residents. It's appropriate for me to push the city of Vancouver to do something about it, and that's what's happening today.
Sure.
The start of that.
But I mean, if you go across the board and go, no, this one is definitely going to pancake. That one is definitely going down. It's going to pancake, and as opposed to suffer some other degree of damage. Do we have buildings like that in town?
We have some ones that are very scary, but you have to realize it's a complex phenomena, and what's going to happen depends a lot on the type of earthquake, the distance away, the depth of the earthquake. Um, if it's a very close earthquake, then a lot of buildings could be badly damaged. If it's further away, deeper, then only a few. I agree with you. We need to do something about it, but it needs to be done in the right way.
And I guess, we are in a high risk quake area, but, we're not like California. We don't get those very frequent reminders that we live in an earthquake prone area. And so how do you keep this top of mind and get people to take this seriously?
Yeah, that's exactly the point. I think that's right. I mean, a lot of places, most places that can have earthquakes as large as we have, can have, as you say, get them every 10, 15, 20 years. We haven't had an earthquake in the city damage buildings, right? So you're right. It's hard to raise awareness, right? But this is that first important step, to have the city of Vancouver receive this report and authorize staff to move forward.
So tell me where the onus is then. So we've gone off, identified a bunch of buildings that are potentially risky or scary. That information goes to council. It goes to the building owners at some point, presumably. What obligation are they under to conduct repairs or upgrades to the building?
And that's up to the city to decide on policy on what to do. So just to be clear, we've looked at buildings. We tried not to look at them with specific addresses. We tried to look at them, remove the address and look at what does the building stock look like. The first step will be I think my advice would be for the city to mandate assessment of all older buildings, right? So that we do find out and we get a rating for the buildings so that the owners know what their building is like. So the owners know which are the ones that have a very high risk. That's the first step. Then once that happens, then the city has to decide what to do with that. And again, that's policy. They could, for example, mandate repair of the very bad buildings. That would be a good idea. But that usually, if we look to the south, I mean, as you say, California has a lot more experience with this, but they have buildings that are also very scary that they've not done anything about over decades and decades, but they're slowly moving towards doing that. Right, hoping the big earthquake doesn't hit in that particular area and moving slowly towards repairing. So that's what we need to do, right? Let's hope the big one doesn't hit tomorrow. Let's move ahead. Let's identify which are the bad buildings, and then the city needs to bring in policy to encourage or mandate repair.
Perry, very good to hear you this morning. Thank you for the time. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's Perry Adebar, professor of structural and earthquake engineering at the University of British Columbia.